Hi, welcome back to the workshop where once again everything is covered in plastic, which can only mean one of two things. Either I've somehow found myself on the set of Dexter, or it's time to get the spray gun out. Luckily for me, it's time to get the spray gun out. Okay, so I've done a bit of work off camera on this neck just to move things along a little bit. I've put the side marker dots in and I've just sanded everything to about 400 grit wet and dry. Now I've masked off the fretboard, but you'll notice I haven't masked off the edges. I'm going to leave those and give those a coat of clear as well. In terms of finish, I've got some of the amber brown coloured lacquer that I did the burst on the body with left over, so I'm going to use that to give it an initial perhaps one or two coats just until I get it the colour that I want it to be, and then from there I'm going to add further coats of clear. Now in terms of setup, I've just got this hung from the ceiling on a hook in a screw in one of the mounting holes, and I've also put a small screw in one of the tuner mounting holes just so I've got a bit of control over the bottom so I can spin it to spray the headstock. In terms of spraying, I'm just going to use my small detail gun. I only need a very small quantity of lacquer for this. Right, let's crack on with it. Okay, so this has had about 3 coats of the amber lacquer now. I've left it about 20-25 minutes between each coat, and I've given it about an hour between the last coat, and I've just gone over it with some 600 wet and dry paper and just taken any kind of roughness off the neck. So now I'm just going to give it 2 or 3 coats of clear and leave it overnight to cure up. I'm not sure if you can see in the camera from that range, but once I've got some coloured lacquer on the neck, it's really starting to bring the figure out in this neck. It looks very nice indeed. I'm happy with that. Okay, on with the clear coats. So I said in the last episode that I was going to make an announcement this time about the Great Guitar Build Off 2021. It's not going to be a particularly long announcement. Basically, I'm going to be in it. So it's taken a slightly different format this year. There's going to be two competitions, one for kit builds and the other for scratch builds. As regular viewers might have come to expect, I'll be taking part in the scratch build competition. I'm still kicking a couple of ideas around in my head as to what the guitar is going to look like, but currently we are in quite a tight lockdown in England. I'm not able to get out to timber suppliers to get wood in, so I think one of the main design constraints is that it's got to be built out of materials that I've got on hand. I can't see it being a problem. I've got quite a lot of suitable material knocking around. It just means I'm probably going to have to be quite imaginative in how I use it. But that's what makes it exciting, isn't it? So I'll be able to update you a little bit more on that once the entry's actually open, which is kind of about a week and a half's time, I think. So yeah, so watch this space and I'll keep you updated. My other bit of news, which is something that's absolutely amazing from my point of view and has happened a lot quicker than I ever imagined it would do, is that I've just broken the 1,000 subscriber mark. So for all you people that have subscribed and who tune in regularly to watch me ramble on in my shed, thank you guys. It means an absolute massive amount to me. I can't really overstate how important it is for me to kind of hit that milestone. I started doing this in the first lockdown when somebody asked to see a demonstration of a guitar that I'd built. So I kind of did that video and stuck it up for a few people to have a look at, and just found that I really enjoyed the process. So that is where this channel has kind of sprung from. So it's probably as unexpected to me as it is to anybody else. So to get it to the 1,000 subscriber mark in about 8 months for me is mind-blowing. So yeah, thanks a lot guys. Okay, so this has had a bit of time to dry now, and I'm not sure if the camera's picking up, but there is some really quite nice figure in this neck. It's not overly flamey, but it is very apparent, so I'm really happy with that. I've deliberately done this neck quite dark, so it's kind of a very warm, deep amber. I just think that would suit the vibe of the guitar better than the more yellow that you might expect in a vintage neck. So all in all, I'm very happy with the way that's come out. Obviously this is going to need flatting and polishing, but I don't expect to have to wait the length of time that I did on the body. A couple of reasons. Firstly, there's not as much lacquer on this neck, so it's going to dry quicker. Secondly, I don't really like really glossy necks, so I'm going to do this. It will be shiny, but it's not going to be like a really high gloss shiny polish on the back of the neck. I prefer a more satiny feel. So because I'm not going to have to polish it quite so heavily, I'm not going to have to leave it quite so long. And you might have noticed as well, I couldn't hold back getting a bit of oil onto the fingerboard, and it's actually come up quite nice. It looks very much like ebony, even though it is actually rosewood. I like ebony fingerboards, so that's not a problem for me. So the next job I've got to do on this before we move back onto the body is just to put the headstock decal on. This is probably going to take me a couple of days to do in total, so I'm not going to film it all, but I'll run you through the process and how I go about it, and then show you the finished results when we start to finish the neck off. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just give the area that I'm going to put the decal on a quick flat off with some 600 wet and dry paper. I'm not sanding into the finish at this point. I'm literally just going to take off any little rough high spots that might be on there. So a very gentle rub. And the reason for that is that the decals will bubble up if there's any lumps or bumps there. So the flatter and smoother it is, the better the decal will go down. So next, I'm just going to take my little decal. Now this has actually been done on a inkjet printer. So this is inkjet water slide paper. readily available from craft stores, Amazon, places like that will stock it. I bought about 5 sheets years and years ago, and it's lasted me all that time. So what I'm going to do now is just take a pair of scissors and cut this to the shape that I want. So generally speaking, smaller is better, and irregular shapes are easier to kind of blend in once we lacquer over this. Okay, so with that cut to shape, it's simply a case of sticking it in a bowl of warm water, and what will happen is that will curl up and then it will flatten out, and once it's flattened out again, it's pretty much ready to release its backing paper. Okay, so that's looking about ready now. If you can see that, it's kind of flattened out. So from here I'm just going to rub a little bit of water onto the area where I'm going to put the decal. That'll just help it slide. Now you do have to be quite careful with these because they are delicate, but basically I'm just going to slide it off the paper. And slide it into place. Where I think it's going to look nice. Sometimes hard to tell, so you might just have to, I think that needs to go forward a little bit. Yeah, there we go. If anyone's wondering about the significance of the name, it's just my name. I'm a bit too unimaginative to think of anything fancy. Okay, from there I'm just going to give it a quick dab with a paper towel. Okay, and that just makes sure that there's no bubbles underneath there, and also takes off the bulk of the moisture. And now I just need to leave that to dry for probably about 10 to 15 minutes. I'll know when it's ready to go because the clear sections of the decal will turn an opaque white. But we don't need to worry about that because as soon as we get some lacquer on it, that will go transparent again. Okay, let's leave this to dry. Something else I've been meaning to talk to you about for a few weeks now and not quite got around to is just to point you in the direction of my Instagram and Facebook pages. I quite often post stuff on Facey and Instagram before it hits YouTube, so if you want a heads up on what's happening, that's a good place to go. And I tend to kind of post there a little bit more regularly. So if that's something that might interest you, I've dropped a couple of links in the description for you. Okay, so that's probably taken 15 minutes, but that decal is dry to the touch and it's also fairly well adhered onto the headstock. So let's set this up a bit better. I'm going to get my mask on and just give this a couple of coats of lacquer. Okay, so that's had its first coat of lacquer. As you probably saw, as soon as that lacquer hit the decal, it went transparent again, which is great. So what I'm going to do now is just leave this coat to flash off for 15-20 minutes, and then I'll give it a further 2 coats with probably a 15-20 minute interval between each one. So I'm going to come back in the morning and I'm going to flat this down with some 600 or 800 wet and dry paper and a small block. And my aim is to eventually just level this whole area out so that the lacquer on the headstock and the lacquer over the decal is at the same level, and from there we can eventually polish it to a shine. Now the eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed in that last clip, as I put the heavy coats of lacquer onto the headstock, it looked a bit milky. That's basically a little bit of blushing in the lacquer. It's quite cold and it's been raining here for a few days now, so the atmosphere is very damp. And all that blushing is just a little bit of excess moisture that's got into the lacquer. As you can see, it's cleared up now. A good way to go about fixing that, if you ever do find yourself in that situation, is just to get some gentle heat onto the part in question, and that will help get the moisture out of the lacquer and it will dry clear. It might be the case that it will dry with a slight hazing or milkiness, but that's generally just in the very top layer of the lacquer, which you'll probably take off when you wet sand it anyway. Okay, I just want to try and get some kind of close-up shots of the fretboard and the fretwork, but it's really quite difficult because the camera is struggling to kind of hold focus on the shiny frets, but I hope you can see nicely crowned and polished with nice smoothed over ends, and hopefully you can see there's some very nice figure in the maple. That's just dirt, ignore that. Okay, so I'm going to call time on this one now. I think the last couple of weeks we've made some really significant progress on the neck, which has really helped me to move things forward in terms of the overall build. I'm going to set this to one side now, give it a week or so to cure up a bit before we flat it back and polish it up. So in the next episode I'll be getting the body back into the workshop and start the cleaning up and polishing process on that. Once again, I just want to say how chuffed I am to get past the 1,000 subscriber mark. So to all of my subscribers, thanks a lot for that. You've really made me happy. And any of you out there who haven't yet subscribed, hit that button, hit the bell icon so you'll get notifications of upcoming videos, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.